At the family lunch, my daughter shouted, "You're just a corpse with lipstick." Everyone laughed. I walked to the bedroom and came back with the document. The will was there. She read it. And suddenly everyone went silent. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. I'm 71 years old, and I thought I'd heard every cruel thing a person could say. I was wrong. The Sunday family lunch had started like any other. I'd spent the morning cooking Lucy's favorite pot roast, setting the dining room table with my grandmother's china, the same set I'd promised would be hers someday. My son Michael had driven down from Sacramento with his wife Jennifer and their twin boys. Lucy lived just 20 minutes away but always arrived last, sweeping in like she was doing us all a favor. She walked through my front door without knocking, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floors I'd scrubbed that morning. At 43, Lucy had inherited her father's sharp features but none of his warmth. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore a black pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. "Sorry I'm late," she announced, though her tone suggested she wasn't sorry at all. Traffic was insane, and I had to take a call from a client. Lucy worked as a real estate agent for high-end properties. She was good at it too, probably because she knew how to make people believe they needed something they couldn't afford. I watched her survey my modest living room, her eyes lingering on the faded wallpaper and worn furniture with barely concealed disgust. "Michael's already here," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "The boys are in the backyard." She nodded curtly and followed me into the dining room where Michael and Jennifer were already seated. The conversation during dinner was polite but strained. Lucy dominated most of it, talking about her latest sales and complaining about how exhausting her job was. She barely touched her food. "You know, Mom," Lucy said suddenly, setting down her fork, "Jennifer and I were talking about you the other day." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. Jennifer shifted uncomfortably in her chair and wouldn't meet my eyes. "Oh." I tried to keep my voice light. "What about?" Lucy leaned back in her chair, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth that didn't reach her eyes. "We're worried about you living alone in this big house. You're getting older and frankly, you're not taking care of yourself the way you should." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Are you though?" Lucy's voice was honey-sweet but her words were sharp. "When's the last time you updated your wardrobe? Or did something with your hair? You shuffle around in those old house dresses like you've given up on life entirely." Michael cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Lucy, maybe we shouldn't." "No, Michael, someone needs to say it." Lucy's eyes never left mine. "Mom, you're 71 years old and you look every day of it. Actually, you look older. You wear those awful old lady clothes, you never do your hair, and you smell like mothballs and sadness." The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. I could feel Jennifer's embarrassment radiating across the table, but she said nothing. Michael stared at his plate. Lucy wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "Honestly, Mom, when I look at you, all I see is a corpse with lipstick." The words hit me like a physical blow. I heard Jennifer gasp softly, but what crushed me wasn't the cruelty of Lucy's words. It was the sound that followed. Laughter. Not just from Lucy but from Michael too. A nervous, uncomfortable chuckle, but laughter nonetheless. My own son was laughing at me. I sat there for a moment, feeling something inside me break apart and rearrange itself into something harder, colder. The woman who had raised these children, who had sacrificed everything for them, who had worked 2 jobs to put Lucy through college, that woman was apparently nothing more than a joke to them. I stood up slowly, my legs shaky but my resolve growing stronger with each second. "Excuse me," I said quietly. Lucy waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be dramatic, Mom. I'm just being honest. Someone has to tell you the truth." I walked out of the dining room without another word, leaving them sitting there with their cruel laughter still echoing in my ears. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, each step feeling heavier than the last. My hands were trembling as I reached into my dresser drawer and pulled out the manila envelope I'd hidden beneath my winter sweaters. The document inside was dated just 3 weeks ago. My last will and testament, the one none of them knew about. The one that would change everything. I walked back downstairs, envelope in hand, and placed it on the dining room table in front of Lucy. She was still smirking, probably expecting me to apologize or cry. "Since you're so concerned about my future," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "perhaps you should know about yours." Lucy's smile faltered as she recognized the legal letterhead. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers, her eyes scanning the pages. The color drained from her face as she read. The room fell completely silent. Lucy's face went white as she read the document, her eyes darting across the pages with increasing panic. "This can't be right," she whispered. I watched her carefully, noting how quickly her arrogant mask had slipped away. "It's quite right, dear. That's my most recent will, dated 3 weeks ago." Michael reached for the papers, and I watched his expression change as he read alongside his sister. The will was simple and clear. Everything I owned would go to the Sacramento Animal Shelter, with small sentimental items distributed to my grandchildren. Lucy and Michael would receive nothing. "Mom, what is this?" Michael's voice cracked. "Why would you?" "I don't understand." But I understood. I'd understood for longer than I cared to admit. The signs had been there for years, growing clearer with each passing month. Lucy's visits had become less frequent unless she needed something. Her conversations were filled with questions about my health, my finances, my plans for the future. She'd started suggesting I downsize, move into one of those lovely senior communities, where I'd be so much happier. I thought back to last Christmas when Lucy had walked through my house with her phone taking pictures. She'd claimed she was documenting memories, but I'd caught her measuring rooms and researching property values online. She'd even brought a friend who happened to be an interior designer, someone who kept commenting on the potential of the place. "You know, Lucy," I said, settling back into my chair, "I've been thinking a lot lately about how you see me. Today just confirmed what I suspected." Lucy's hand shook as she set the papers down. "Mom, if this is about what I said earlier, I was just being honest." I finished for her. "Yes, you were. And now I'm returning the favor." Jennifer excused herself to check on the children, clearly desperate to escape the tension. Michael sat frozen, looking like he wanted to disappear entirely. Only Lucy and I remained locked in our stare, two women who had finally dropped all pretense. I remembered the phone call I'd overheard 3 months ago. Lucy had been in my kitchen, speaking quietly to someone she thought was out of earshot. "I can't wait much longer," she'd said. "The house alone is worth at least $800,000, and she's sitting on a decent nest egg. I've got credit cards maxed out, and David's business is bleeding money. We need that inheritance, and honestly, how much longer can she realistically live?" At the time, I'd felt like I'd been slapped. My own daughter was calculating my death like a business transaction. But today, sitting here watching her panic over a document that threatened her financial future, I felt something different. I felt powerful. "The truth is, Lucy, I've been watching you for quite some time. Listening too." I folded my hands in my lap. "Did you really think I didn't notice when you started going through my papers when you thought I was napping? Or when you had that appraiser friend of yours accidentally drop by?" Lucy's face flushed red. "I was just trying to help you plan." "You were planning, all right. Planning my funeral so you could inherit this house." I gestured around the dining room. "Tell me, dear, what were you going to do with my china? Sell it? Or just throw it away because it's not fancy enough for your tastes?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could see Lucy's mind racing, trying to find the right words to manipulate me back into compliance. She'd always been good at that, even as a child. Tears when she wanted something, anger when tears didn't work, and finally cruel words designed to make me feel guilty for disappointing her. "Mom," she said finally, her voice taking on that wheedling tone I knew so well, "you can't seriously be considering leaving everything to some animal shelter. I'm your daughter. Michael is your son. We're your family." Family. I tasted the word like something bitter. "Tell me, Lucy, when was the last time you visited me because you wanted to spend time with me? Not because you needed money, or wanted to check on your future inheritance, but because you genuinely enjoyed my company." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. We both knew the answer. Michael shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, maybe we should all calm down and discuss this rationally." Rationally? I turned to my son, this man I'd raised, who just laughed at his mother being called a corpse. Tell me, Michael, what's rational about sitting silently while your sister humiliates the woman who sacrificed everything for you both? His face reddened. I didn't mean to laugh. It was just unexpected. Unexpected. I nodded slowly. Yes, I suppose hearing your mother described as a walking corpse would be unexpected. What would have been more unexpected is if you defended me. Lucy suddenly straightened, her real personality emerging from behind the mask of false concern. Fine, Mom. You want honesty? Here's honesty. You are 71 years old. You live alone in this museum of a house. And yes, you look old and tired and sad. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but it's the truth. And frankly, leaving everything to some animal shelter out of spite is exactly the kind of pathetic thing I'd expect from you. There it was. The real Lucy finally revealed in all her entitled, cruel glory. I felt almost relieved to see her drop the pretense. I smiled calmly and reached for the will. You know what, dear? You're absolutely right about one thing. I am tired. Tired of pretending this family is something it's not. As I stood to leave the room, I heard Lucy's voice behind me. No longer honey-sweet but sharp with panic. Mom, wait. We need to talk about this. You can't just. But I could. And I would. The week following that disastrous Sunday dinner, Lucy called me every single day. Her voice messages started apologetic, then became increasingly desperate. Mom, we need to talk. I think there's been a misunderstanding. By Thursday, her tone had shifted to barely controlled anger. This is ridiculous, Mom. Call me back. I didn't call her back. Instead, I spent those quiet days really thinking about the woman my daughter had become. Or perhaps, about the woman she'd always been underneath the mask. On Friday afternoon, while sorting through old photographs in my bedroom, I heard voices downstairs. Lucy had let herself in using the spare key I'd forgotten she had. She wasn't alone. The kitchen definitely needs updating, I heard her say. But the bones of the house are solid. The location alone makes it worth at least $800,000, probably more in today's market. I crept to the top of the stairs and peered down. Lucy was walking through my living room with a woman I didn't recognize. Someone wearing an expensive suit and carrying a tablet. When are you thinking of listing it? The stranger asked. Soon, Lucy replied. My mother is 71 and showing signs of. Well, let's just say she's not making the best decisions anymore. I'm working on getting power of attorney. For her own protection, of course. My blood turned to ice. Power of attorney. She was planning to have me declared incompetent. I stayed hidden as they moved through my house like vultures circling prey. Lucy pointed out original hardwood floors, crown molding, the updated electrical system I'd paid for just 2 years ago. She spoke about me like I was already dead. Or worse, like I was some confused old woman who couldn't take care of herself. The furniture will all have to go, Lucy said dismissively as they entered the dining room where we'd had our confrontation just days before. Most of it is old and outdated. She has some antiques that might be worth something, but honestly, it's all very grandmotherly. Grandmotherly. The word stung because it wasn't the furniture she was really talking about. It was me. After they left, I sat in my kitchen feeling shaken and angry. I thought about calling Michael, but I already knew what he'd say. He'd tell me I was overreacting, that Lucy was just being practical, that I should be grateful she was thinking ahead. Michael had always been a peacekeeper, which meant he usually sided with whoever made the most noise. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I called Lucy's house, and when her husband David answered, I told him I was conducting a survey about senior care options. He talked freely, probably assuming I was some telemarketer he'd never see again. My mother-in-law is getting up there in age, he told me, and my wife thinks she might need more help soon. We're looking into some nice facilities. Nothing too expensive, mind you, but somewhere she'd be comfortable. Facilities. They'd already been shopping around for places to put me. Has your mother-in-law expressed interest in moving? I asked, disguising my voice with a slight accent. David laughed. Oh no, she thinks she's fine living alone. But Lucy says that's just pride talking. Sometimes you have to make these decisions for people, you know? For their own good. I hung up feeling sick. They weren't just planning to inherit my house. They were planning to warehouse me somewhere while they waited for me to die. The next morning, I drove to the library and spent 3 hours researching elder law on their computers. What I learned terrified me. Getting someone declared incompetent wasn't as difficult as I'd thought, especially if their adult children presented a united front. A few doctor visits, some carefully documented incidents of confusion or poor judgment, and suddenly your life was no longer your own. I thought about Lucy's recent visits, how she'd started asking pointed questions about my memory. "Mom, don't you remember? We talked about this last week." Usually followed by a concerned look shared with whoever else was in the room. I'd assumed she was just being impatient, but now I realized she'd been building a case. That afternoon, I made an appointment with my doctor, Dr. Peterson, who'd been treating me for 15 years. I told him about my concerns and asked him to document that I was of sound mind and body. "Connie," he said gently, "has someone suggested you're not capable of making your own decisions? My daughter seems to think I need more supervision." Dr. Peterson frowned. "You're one of my sharpest patients. Your blood pressure is well controlled, your cognitive function is excellent, and you're more active than most people half your age. If anyone suggests otherwise, you send them to me." I left his office with a letter stating my complete mental competency, dated and signed. Felt like armor. But that night, lying in bed in the house I'd lived in for 43 years, I realized armor wouldn't be enough. Lucy wasn't just greedy, she was ruthless. And she'd clearly decided that her inheritance was worth more than her relationship with her mother. I needed to be more than defensive. I needed to be strategic. The next morning, I called my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who'd lived next door for 20 years. "Helen," I said, "I need to ask you a favor. Would you mind keeping an eye on who comes and goes from my house? Lucy has been letting herself in, and I'm starting to feel like my privacy is being invaded." Helen was delighted to help. At 75, she spent most of her day watching the neighborhood anyway. "Oh honey, I've seen that daughter of yours prowling around your place. Just last week she brought some fancy woman over when you weren't home. They walked all around your house taking pictures." My suspicions were confirmed. Lucy had been treating my home like her property for weeks, maybe months. As I hung up the phone, I realized something had shifted inside me. The hurt and betrayal I'd felt after Sunday dinner had crystallized into something harder and more focused. I wasn't going to be anyone's victim, and I certainly wasn't going to let my daughter steal my life from me while I was still living it. Lucy wanted to play games with my future? Fine. But she'd forgotten something important. I'd been playing games a lot longer than she had. Chapter 4. The Silent Plan. On Monday morning, I dressed carefully in my best navy blue suit, the one I'd worn to my husband's funeral 12 years ago, and drove downtown to the offices of Hamilton, Burke & Associates. I'd chosen them specifically because they were the most expensive law firm in the city, the kind of place that dealt with wealthy families and complicated estates. James Hamilton himself, a distinguished man in his 60s, listened intently as I explained my situation. I didn't dramatize or embellish. I simply laid out the facts. My daughter's behavior, her plans to have me declared incompetent, her real estate assessment of my home. "Mrs. Morrison," he said when I finished, "what exactly do you want to accomplish?" "I want to protect myself," I said simply, "and I want to ensure my assets go where I choose, not where someone else decides they should go." He nodded thoughtfully. "We can certainly help you create an ironclad will and establish some protective measures. But I have to ask, are you absolutely certain about disinheriting your children entirely?" I've been thinking about this question for days. "Mr. Hamilton, if your own daughter was planning to have you declared incompetent so she could control your money, how would you feel about leaving her your life's work?" He didn't need to answer. His expression said everything. We spent the next 2 hours crafting documents that would make Lucy's plans impossible. A new will, certainly, but also a durable power of attorney naming my longtime friend Margaret as my agent, and a detailed letter explaining my mental state and my reasons for these decisions. "I want you to understand," Mr. Hamilton said as we concluded. "Once these documents are signed and witnessed, your daughter will have no legal recourse. Even if she contests the will, the protections we're putting in place will make it virtually impossible for her to succeed." That's exactly what I want. But legal protection was only part of my plan. I had something else in mind, something that would teach Lucy a lesson she'd never forget. That afternoon, I drove to the Sacramento Animal Shelter, the organization that would inherit everything according to my new will. I'd chosen them not just out of spite, but because I'd been volunteering there quietly for 3 years. Unlike my family, the people at the shelter genuinely appreciated my time and effort. Mrs. Morrison, Sarah, the volunteer coordinator, greeted me with the kind of warm smile I never got from my own children. "We weren't expecting you today. I wanted to talk to you about something important," I said. "I'm planning to make a significant donation to the shelter, and I wanted to discuss how it might be used." We spent an hour talking about the shelter's needs. A new medical wing, better kennels, a proper training facility. Sarah's eyes lit up as she described their dreams for expansion, dreams that had been limited by their small budget. "How significant is this donation?" she asked carefully. "Significant enough to make all of those dreams possible," I told her. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Purpose. My money would actually make a difference in the world, rather than simply funding Lucy's lifestyle or enabling her continued selfishness. That evening, Lucy called again. This time I answered. "Mom, thank God. I've been so worried about you. We really need to sit down and talk about what happened last Sunday." Her voice was different now, softer, more manipulative. She'd clearly decided that anger wasn't working and had switched to a more subtle approach. "I'm listening," I said neutrally. "I want to apologize for what I said. I was stressed about work and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair." I almost laughed. Lucy had never apologized for anything in her adult life unless she wanted something. "I've been thinking," she continued, "maybe it would be good for you to have some help around the house. Someone to cook and clean. Make sure you're taking your medications properly. I could arrange for someone very nice to come in a few days a week." There it was, the first step toward establishing my need for supervision. "That's very thoughtful of you, dear, but I'm managing just fine on my own." "Are you though, Mom? Because honestly, you seemed a little confused on Sunday. And I noticed you've been repeating yourself lately, asking the same questions multiple times." I hadn't been repeating myself, and Lucy knew it. But if she was planning to build a case for my incompetence, she needed documented instances of confusion or memory problems. "I appreciate your concern," I said calmly, "but my doctor says I'm in excellent health, both physically and mentally." There was a pause. "When did you see Dr. Peterson?" "Last week. I have a letter from him if you'd like to see it." Another pause, longer this time. "Mom, sometimes doctors aren't the best judges of cognitive decline in elderly patients. Maybe it would be good to get a second opinion." Elderly patients. The phrase stung, but I kept my voice steady. "I'll certainly consider it." We chatted for a few more minutes about innocuous topics, but I could hear the wheels turning in Lucy's head. She was already planning her next move. After hanging up, I called Margaret, my friend of 30 years and now my designated power of attorney. "Connie, are you sure about all this?" she asked after I explained what I'd discovered. "I mean, I know Lucy can be difficult, but do you really think she'd have you committed?" "Margaret, she's already researching nursing homes and shopping for real estate agents. She's not planning to have me committed. She's planning to have me declared incompetent just long enough to take control of my finances." Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "What do you need me to do?" "Just be prepared. And if anything happens to me, if I have any kind of accident or sudden illness, I want you to ask questions. Lots of questions." Over the next few days, I played my part perfectly. When Lucy visited, I was slightly more forgetful than usual, asking her to repeat things, losing track of our conversation occasionally. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of minor confusion that could be interpreted as early cognitive decline by someone looking for it. Lucy took careful notes on her phone, I noticed. Building her case. But what Lucy didn't know was that I was building a case too. Every conversation was being recorded by the new device Mr. Hamilton had recommended. Every visit was documented by Mrs. Patterson next door. Every medical appointment was carefully scheduled and recorded. If Lucy wanted to play games with my mental competency, she'd discover that the woman she thought was a corpse with lipstick was actually several steps ahead of her. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for her to walk into it. 2 weeks after our phone conversation, Lucy suggested we have another family dinner. This time she wanted it at her house. A modern, sterile place that always made me feel like I was visiting a doctor's office. She claimed she wanted to make things right, and discuss my future care needs in a comfortable setting. I accepted graciously, knowing exactly what she was planning. The dinner was a carefully orchestrated performance. Lucy had invited not just Michael and Jennifer, but also David's brother Tom, who happened to be a psychiatrist, and a woman introduced as Mrs. Chan, supposedly a friend but who I quickly realized was a social worker specializing in elder care. They thought they were so clever. Lucy played the concerned daughter perfectly, fussing over me as soon as I arrived. "Mom, you look tired. Are you sleeping well? Have you been taking your medications?" Throughout dinner, she asked leading questions designed to make me appear confused or forgetful in front of her carefully selected witnesses. "Mom, don't you remember what we discussed about getting someone to help you around the house? We talked about it just last week." I played along beautifully, occasionally looking puzzled, asking her to repeat things, even pretending to forget Tom's name despite having met him countless times. Mrs. Chun watched everything with sharp, calculating eyes, no doubt preparing her assessment. After dinner, Lucy gathered everyone in the living room. "I've asked you all here because I'm genuinely worried about Mom's welfare," she began, her voice heavy with false concern. "She's been living alone in that big house, and I don't think she's managing as well as she pretends." Michael nodded supportively. "She does seem more forgetful lately." "It's perfectly natural," Tom interjected in his professional voice. "Cognitive decline often accelerates after age 70. The important thing is to recognize when someone needs additional support." Mrs. Chun leaned forward. "Mrs. Morrison, how do you feel about your current living situation? Do you ever feel overwhelmed or confused?" This was it, the moment they expected me to break down and admit I needed help. Instead, I smiled pleasantly and reached into my purse. "Actually, I feel wonderful about my living situation," I said, pulling out a thick manila folder. "In fact, I've been doing quite a bit of planning lately." Lucy's face went white as I opened the folder and began distributing copies of documents. "This is a letter from Dr. Peterson dated last week, confirming my excellent cognitive and physical health. This is a second opinion from Dr. Martinez, the neurologist, confirming the same thing. And this," I handed Lucy a copy of my new will, "is my updated last will and testament." The room fell silent as they read. Tom's professional demeanor cracked first. "Mrs. Morrison, this will leaves everything to an animal shelter." "That's correct. The Sacramento Animal Shelter does wonderful work, and they appreciate donations from people who are mentally competent to make them." Lucy's hands were shaking as she read. "Mom, you can't be serious. This is not rational." "On the contrary, it's perfectly rational. I'm leaving my assets to an organization that values what I have to offer, rather than to people who see me as an obstacle to their inheritance." Mrs. Chun cleared her throat uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should discuss." "There's nothing to discuss," I interrupted gently. "I'm of sound mind, I have medical documentation to prove it, and I've made my decisions with full legal counsel." I stood up, gathering my documents. "Lucy dear, I know what you've been planning. The real estate assessments, the nursing home research, tonight's little intervention. I've known for weeks." Lucy's mask finally slipped completely. "You can't do this. That money, that house, it should go to family." "You're right," I said calmly. "It should go to family. But family doesn't call you a corpse with lipstick. Family doesn't plot to have you declared incompetent. Family doesn't measure your rooms for renovation while you're still living in them." Michael looked confused. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I turned to face him. "Ask your sister about the real estate agent she brought to my house. Ask her about the power of attorney papers she's been researching. Ask her about the conversation she had with David about finding me a facility." The color drained from Michael's face as he turned to look at Lucy. "Lucy, is this true?" Lucy's composure crumbled entirely. "I was trying to help. She's 71 years old, living alone in that huge house. Something could happen to her and then what? We'd have no legal recourse, no way to protect her." "Protect me?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You weren't trying to protect me, Lucy. You were trying to protect your inheritance." Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding." "There's been no misunderstanding," I said firmly. My daughter invited you here tonight to help her build a case for my incompetence. She thought if enough people witnessed me appearing confused or forgetful, she could use that to challenge my mental capacity later. Mrs. Chun stood up abruptly. I think I should go. This isn't what I was told this meeting would be about. As she headed for the door, Lucy called after her desperately. Mrs. Chun, please, you can see she's not thinking clearly. But Mrs. Chun was already gone, and Tom was gathering his things too. The room emptied quickly, leaving only family members staring at each other across an uncomfortable silence. Mom, Michael said finally. Even if Lucy made some mistakes, surely you don't want to cut us out completely? I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, who'd watched his sister orchestrate this entire charade without saying a word to warn me. Michael, when Lucy called me a corpse with lipstick 2 weeks ago, you laughed. When she humiliated me in my own home, you said nothing. Tonight, you sat silently while she tried to have me declared incompetent. What exactly have you done that makes you think you deserve my life savings? He had no answer. Lucy was crying now, but they were tears of rage, not remorse. You're going to regret this, Mom. When you're old and alone and need help, don't come crawling back to us. I smiled and picked up my purse. Darling, I'm already old. But I'm not alone. I have real friends who care about me. And I certainly won't need help from people who see me as nothing more than a walking inheritance. As I walked toward the door, Lucy's voice followed me, high-pitched with desperation. That money belongs to this family. I paused in the doorway and turned back one last time. You're absolutely right. It belongs to family. I just finally figured out who my real family is. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click, and for the first time in months, I felt completely free. 3 years have passed since that night at Lucy's house, and I'm writing this from my favorite chair in the sunroom, watching the morning light filter through the garden I finally had time to properly tend. At 74, I've discovered something remarkable. Life without toxic people in it is absolutely wonderful. The first few months after cutting ties with Lucy and Michael were admittedly difficult. There were angry phone calls that I didn't answer, guilt-inducing letters that I threw away unopened, and even a few attempts at reconciliation that felt more like manipulation than genuine remorse. Lucy tried everything: tears, threats, even showing up at my door with Michael in tow, claiming they just wanted to work things out. But I'd learned something important during those weeks of planning and preparation. I didn't owe anyone my suffering, not even my own children. The house feels different now. Without the constant tension of Lucy's visits and her judgmental assessments of my life, my home has become a sanctuary again. I've redecorated the dining room, replacing the formal furniture with comfortable pieces where my real friends can gather for the dinner parties I've started hosting again. Margaret comes by twice a week, not because I need supervision but because we enjoy each other's company. Mrs. Patterson and I have become closer friends, sharing morning coffee and evening walks. I've joined a book club at the library and a gardening group at the community center. These people know me as Connie, a woman with opinions, interests, and stories to tell, not as someone's elderly mother who needs managing. The animal shelter has thrived beyond even my expectations. The donation I've already made from selling some investments has funded the new medical wing, and Sarah tells me regularly how many more animals they can help now. When I die, the remainder of my estate will complete their expansion plans. It feels good to know my life's work will continue helping creatures who truly need it. I still think about Lucy sometimes, usually when I'm working in the garden or cooking dinner for one. I wonder if she ever realized what she lost when she chose money over relationship. I wonder if Michael understands that his silence cost him more than his voice ever could have. But these thoughts don't bring me pain anymore. Just a kind of distant sadness, like remembering a movie with an unhappy ending. 6 months ago, I received an unexpected visitor. Jennifer, Michael's wife, came by on a Tuesday afternoon looking nervous and apologetic. Mrs. Morrison, she said, standing awkwardly in my doorway. I know I probably shouldn't be here, but I wanted to apologize for what happened at that dinner. I should have said something. I invited her in for tea, curious about what had prompted this visit. Michael doesn't know I'm here, she admitted. He's still angry about the will, still convinced you'll change your mind eventually. But Lucy's been struggling. She told me that David's business had failed completely, that Lucy had lost their house and was now working at a department store, barely making ends meet. The inheritance she'd counted on wasn't coming, and apparently, she'd built her entire financial future around money that was never really hers. She asks about you sometimes, Jennifer said quietly. I think she misses you, but she's too proud to admit she was wrong. I felt a flicker of something, not quite pity but not satisfaction either. Jennifer, do you think Lucy misses me? Or does she miss what she thought I could give her? Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. I think maybe she doesn't know the difference. After Jennifer left, I sat in my garden thinking about second chances and forgiveness. For a brief moment I considered reaching out to Lucy, offering some kind of olive branch. But then I remembered her voice calling me a corpse with lipstick, remembered the real estate agent measuring my rooms, remembered the careful orchestration of that final dinner designed to steal my autonomy. Some bridges once burned should stay that way. Last week I updated my will one final time. The animal shelter will still receive the bulk of my estate, but I've added a small provision for my grandchildren, Michael's twin boys, who are now 14 and have never been anything but sweet to me. They'll receive funds for their college education, with the stipulation that they can't access the money until they're 25. By then, hopefully, they'll have learned something about the value of family that their parents never understood. I've also left letters for Lucy and Michael, to be delivered after my death. Not angry letters but honest ones. I want them to understand that their inheritance wasn't stolen by a vindictive old woman. It was forfeited by their own choices. I want them to know that I loved them deeply, but I loved myself enough not to let that love be used as a weapon against me. This morning as I write this, I can hear children playing in the park across the street. The sun is warm on my face, and I have lunch plans with Margaret and dinner plans with my book club friends. Tonight, I'll probably work on the photo album I'm making for the shelter, documenting all the animals who found homes thanks to the donations I've been able to make. I am 74 years old, and I am not a corpse with lipstick. I am a woman who finally learned that family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by mutual respect and genuine affection. I am someone who discovered that the most important inheritance you can leave isn't money. It's the example of how to live with dignity. When people ask me if I regret cutting ties with my children, I tell them the truth. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret doing it. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst behavior, even if that someone is your own child. Lucy was right about one thing: I am old. But I'm not tired or sad or pathetic. I'm free. And that freedom, hard-won and carefully protected, is the most valuable thing I've ever owned. As I close this account of my story, I hope anyone reading it will remember this. You are never too old to choose yourself. You are never too old to demand respect. And you are never too old to build a life filled with people who see your worth. The flowers in my garden are blooming beautifully this year.